It sucks the air out of the episode every time it cuts back to Rafi.
I don't think that's a little harsh. I think that's the truth.
Hi guys, Geecher64 here, and today we're talking about Star Trek, specifically Picard Season 3, Episode 2, titled Disengage. And I know this video is very late. I do want to apologize for that. I've been trying to get my reviews up the day after the episode premieres, or at least the weekend after it premieres. I'm going to try my best to continue doing that. This one is very late, so I do want to apologize for that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to pay in the algorithm, so if you do like this video, hit the like button. That'll help out a lot. If you're new here, where I'm coming from in my review is I am a longtime Star Trek fan. Love TNG, DS9 era, Voyager, like that stuff is my favorite. I've not been a fan of New Trek. I don't really like New Trek. I don't like Discovery. And I don't like Picard Season 1 or Season 2. However, Season 3 is surprising so far. Like, I'm liking it. I wanted to give this a fair shot because a new showrunner came on board. And 2 episodes in, I am definitely interested to see how this progresses. We're definitely in the setup phase, so it could all fall apart, but only time will tell.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
And the way I do my reviews is I basically do a breakdown. We walk through the plot. It's just a discussion. I share my thoughts on the plot points and stuff like that. And then I do a recap portion at the end that recaps those general thoughts, as well as kind of in a more standard review format there at the end. And those will be time marked. So I do want to thank everybody for joining me today. Let's go ahead and jump into this. The episode opens up 2 weeks earlier than where we left in the last episode. And so it's a flashback, and Jack is trying to deliver some medical supplies when he's boarded by the Fenris Rangers, which were introduced in Picard Season 1. Could have done without that. I really don't like being reminded of Picard Season 1 and 2. Thankfully, that's at a minimum. And he kind of bribes the Fenris Rangers with some Romulan ale as well as some weapons so he can deliver these medical supplies. And I gotta say, Romulan ale is definitely my one fictional drink out of any movie or TV show in entertainment that I would love to try. I'd love to try some Romulan ale. You know, the Federation made it illegal, and I just want to try some Romulan ale.
Stop it. Get some help.
The Rangers do take the bribe, and they contact some unknown person saying that they found him, obviously referring to Jack. And my only question from this flashback was, where's Beverly at this point? Like, how come she's not involved in this flashback? That was the question I was really left with, more so than the given question of who is this Fenris Ranger contacting. Then cutting back to the present, we got the big bug ship up against the Helios, which is Crusher's ship. And Jack tells Riker and Picard that he doesn't know who is hunting them, but whoever they are, they've shown up as a variety of people, including the Fenris Rangers, as I mentioned before, and what we saw in the flashback, as well as some Klingons and some people in Starfleet uniforms, and they've been running for months for whoever this is. Then cutting back to the Titan, we've got Captain Shaw, who seems to be kind of a contentious character with the fandom so far, but I like him. I like Captain Shaw. Like, you kind of understand where he's coming from, and that it's all of his lines of dialogue are not meant to belittle the characters. They're meant to show where he's coming from and what type of captain, what kind of Starfleet captain he is. He's more by the book. He even has a really interesting quote or another dig at Picard and Riker, like he did in the first episode, where he says they think a couple of brass medals make them golden boys. And obviously Picard and Riker don't think that, but Shaw views them in that way. And it really creates this interesting tension. And this is the kind of tension that really only happens when the chain of command is observed. This is one of the things that has kind of been missing from New Trek, or not kind of, but it has been missing from Star Trek. It is an exploratory military organization, and the chain of command is an important part of that. And you had Picard and Riker divert the ship and steal a shuttle, and Shaw doesn't want to risk his crew to go rescue them. Right? And so that tension there is good. And it doesn't automatically make Captain Shaw a bad guy. He's just a by-the-book captain. And by the book, 2 people showed up and stole, Starfleet property without orders. And he's not going to risk his 500-plus crew to go rescue them. Then back on the Helios, we have this interesting exchange between Jack and Picard, where he calls him captain, and he's corrected and says that, he's an admiral now. And Jack responds with, from what I heard, history remembers you with one less pip. And it's a nice observation of how Picard is known to everybody, really, not just Jack, but it also shows that Jack is obviously well aware of who Picard is. and has probably been told stories about him. And the bug ship shoots out the shuttle that's docked with the Helios, and so there's no way for them to escape because they were trying to escape with the shuttle. They can't now because it's completely toast. And then we get the title drop of Disengage. Then we're back with Rafi, and yeah, I don't like Rafi. Rafi is the worst.
The worst. She's the worst in the world.
And what I mean by she's the worst, I'm basing that solely on the character that I've witnessed through season 1 and season 2. A terrible character, terrible person, and definitely does not belong at Starfleet. But regardless, here in this season, she hasn't done anything to make me completely dislike her. So if you're lucky enough to have only seen this season, well, you're lucky. And she did fail to stop the destruction of the Starfleet Recruitment Center at the end of the last episode that we saw. She is talking with her handler, and Starfleet calls off the investigation. And the idea of Rafi being an undercover Starfleet agent, it's a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea based on everything I know about Rafi.
Maybe there's something wrong with the universe.
Rafi obviously doesn't take orders and doesn't take direction at all, and so she wants to go after a Ferengi named Sneed to get some more information because, you know, she doesn't buy the official PR story that's put out there. And you know, Rafi is not going to disengage. That's a good title drop there. She's not going to disengage. She's going to go and do what Rafi wants to do because that's what Rafi does, whatever she wants to do.
I'll do what I want.
If there's anybody in Starfleet that absolutely should follow the chain of command, it would be an undercover Starfleet agent. Just saying. Then we get back to the good stuff on the Titan. That's one thing you will notice throughout this episode is every time it cuts to Rafi, it just, the pacing takes a major hit. So we're back to the Titan, the stuff we want to see. And Seven tries to appeal to Shaw's legacy to get him to help out Picard and Riker. And she says, you could be known as the hero who saved heroes, or you could be known as the captain who let 2 legends die. And this is more along the lines of what we as an audience think, right? We view Picard and Riker as legends, as heroes, you know, and how Picard was treated in the first couple seasons of Picard. He was treated as this feeble old man who could never fought back, and everybody yelled at him and belittled him, and he just had to sit there and take it, and everything he ever did in his life was a mistake. That was the perception of Picard based on season 1 and season 2. Here, we have Seven referring to them as legends and heroes, and that's how the audience perceives them, and that's how a lot of people in Starfleet perceive them. And it's just nice to see lines of dialogue where our characters that we like aren't belittled constantly. So Picard sets up some transport inhibitors as the bug ship's trying to transport Jack away. And it's good to see Picard actually doing something. He's actively doing things and making smart decisions, not getting yelled at. Like I said before, that was really irritating in the first couple seasons, him getting yelled at and put down and just making dumb decisions. Here, he's actively doing something. He's like, all right, we need to put these transport inhibitors up. And as Jack's getting transported away, that gives him an idea of, well, they obviously are after Jack. So the bug ship try to board the Helios, but Riker takes them out very quickly with a plasma grenade, forcing the bug ship to lock onto them with a tractor beam and try to pull them in. I don't know why they didn't just beam over more bug people, but I guess they just didn't want to lose any more personnel. I have no idea. But regardless, they wanted tractor beam up the Helios to their bug ship and board that way. Then the Titan comes in and breaks up the tractor beam and then beams Jack, Picard, Riker, and Beverly on board the Titan. Then we're back with Rafi. Again, I swear, like I said before, every time it comes back to Rafi, even though this is definitely the best version of Rafi that we've seen, she's still pretty bad, and it's just it's a pacing suck. It sucks the pacing. It sucks the air out of the episode every time it cuts back to Rafi. And Rafi is meeting with her ex-husband, and he could possibly set up a meeting between her and Sneed because he just so happens to know who Sneed is. Very coincidental, but okay. So her ex-husband thinks that this is about her trying to rekindle her relationship with her son, which has been completely, decimated. And then she's like, no, I want to set up a meeting with Sneed. So the ex-husband gives her an ultimatum. He's like, I'll set up this meeting with Sneed, or I will put a good word in for you with our son and perhaps build that relationship back up. And you could read this in one of two ways, right? And it all depends on how you view Rafi as a character, if you've seen season 1 and 2, unfortunately, or if you're just watching season 3 in isolation. You could view this move as a selfish move for Rafi or a selfless move for Rafi. And the reason why I say that is because what we know about Rafi's character, as she's been established, is that she is a very selfish person. The reason she doesn't have a relationship with her son is because she made a lot of selfish decisions. So you could say it's selfless to give up potentially rebuilding this relationship with her son. Or you could say it's selfish because Rafi really only cares about Rafi and what is in her direct path. So you could view it as she's once again choosing her job over her family, which is part of the reason why she has such a broken relationship with her family. So I do think it's interesting. For the vast majority of people, I'm pretty sure they're going to look at this decision as a selfless decision. But I just want to throw out an argument that you could view it the other way as well. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of how you perceive the character. And we're back to the action, the stuff we actually care about, and that's on the Titan. And I do think it's funny because Jack says, Beverly says not to trust anyone. He's beamed over the ship. He's like, all these people, Beverly told you not to trust anyone. You basically brought everyone, talking about the Titan. But it's kind of funny because earlier in the episode, he's like, I hope you brought a bigger ship. So I was like, Jack, you need to make a decision. If they did bring a bigger ship, who do you think would be running the bigger ship? And I'm going to harp on this again. I mentioned it in the last episode. I have to mention it again. The lighting is insane. I think it's the worst thing so far about the first couple episodes. And it's really New Trek in general. This is not exclusive to Picard or the third season of Picard. The lighting on these ships is insane. It is so dark. You can barely even see the colors of the uniforms. Like the gold ones are pretty much the only ones you can make out what the color is. The red and blue uniforms, like it's so dark, it's even hard to tell the two apart. And before anybody says anything, I watched it on a 120-inch screen and it's a 4K, and it's hard to make out what's happening. So I'm not a fan of how dark these ships are lit. But regardless of the lighting, we are then introduced to our villain, Vadic, played by Amanda Plummer, who knows about Shaw and Picard, even commenting about Picard being in the synthetic flesh, unfortunately, again, referring to the terrible season 1 of Picard, which I wish I could forget. But she obviously has some information because she talks about Shaw, or knowing some things about Shaw as well. So I think that's pretty interesting. And she wants to talk to Jack. He apparently has a bounty on his head. And at first, Shaw is not going to negotiate with Vadic, but she lowers the shield so that the Titan can get a scan of all the armaments on this bug fighter ship that we're seeing. And after they scan the ship and they're like, wow, this thing could definitely destroy the Titan, she gives the Titan 1 hour to hand over Jack. And then Vadic does something that I have never seen in Star Trek, at least I don't ever remember seeing this. She actually uses the tractor beam to grab the Helios and throw it at the Titan. It's something I've never seen, definitely not in live action. It did actually remind me about something from a comic book from Star Trek X-Men. This was the first Star Trek X-Men where the X-Men meet Kirk, Spock, and the Enterprise crew. And the Imperial Guard, the Gladiator, shows up and punches the Enterprise. And that's kind of what I thought of when I saw this, the Helios getting thrown at the Titan. I like Shaw's statement here. He says, we are essentially cornered in space, which has no corners. I think Shaw has some great lines here. Like, people who don't like Shaw, I don't know if they just don't like the fact that he's against Picard and Riker, or they just don't like the character. But I like the character so far. He has some great lines. One thing you can really feel in this episode is that Shaw is increasingly exasperated throughout the episode. Like, from the moment we introduced him in the first episode and throughout this entire episode, every 10 minutes he's get progressively more exasperated. And so yeah, I like Shaw. And as Picard and Riker are trying to get some answers from Jack about Vadic, because Vadic, wants Jack, Shaw reveals that Jack Crusher is known by many names, accusing him of being a con man, and he ends up getting thrown in the brig. And then Shaw relieves Seven of duty for insubordination. Again, is it a good move? Is it a move that the audience is going to like? No, but it is a move that would happen when you're actually following the chain of command, and the first officer's allegiance are obviously not to the ship but to the crew, and that's how Captain Shaw sees it. So this is obviously a move that makes sense. And as Shaw says, the rules of engagement outside Federation space are clear preservation of the ship and crew above all else. I don't know if that sounds right. I don't think that sounds right.
Perhaps not.
Regardless, Shaw decides to hand Jack over to Vadic because he can't win in a fight with the bug ship there. So there is a moment where Riker tells Picard to do the math on Jack because he's clearly not seeing what Riker is seeing, which is that Picard is the father.
You are the father.
So Picard goes to the brig to talk to Jack. He goes over some things that he's accused of. And Picard basically talks about, hey, this isn't the Beverly that I know. She wouldn't make these decisions. And Jack's like, yes, we did it together. And he says, is there anyone you knew who is still the person you knew? Or have you planted roots in your vineyard while everyone else has moved on? Again, I really like the dialogue. I think that's probably my favorite thing so far with these first 2 episodes is the dialogue feels smart. It feels sharp. It feels like the characters are intelligent. And it feels like it's actually moving the plot along. And all of those things have been sorely missing from Picard season 1 and 2. And so Picard outright asks him, well, who is your father? And Jack responds, I never had one. But what I think based on this exchange is that it seems that Jack knows that Picard is his father. That's what I got out of this exchange anyway. I do think that there is some more to Jack's origins maybe than Picard just being the father. I don't know. There seems to be some things that are left open to be ambiguous on purpose so that you could speculate as to who exactly Jack is. But to me, what I've seen so far, Picard is the father. Jack offers to hand himself over because he wants to save his mom, Beverly. But Picard would rather not hand him over to the thugs because he deserves a fair trial. He's not going to, it's not Starfleet's, general policy to hand over people who are accused of things just to bounty hunters. And then we're back to Rafi again.
Oh, come on!
But she finally gets her meeting with Sneed, the Ferengi, and it's kind of nice to just see a classic Ferengi here, especially one that actually looks like a Ferengi. And he's got like a collection of some like old human relics, which is kind of interesting. He even has like a baseball, which is interesting. I wonder if it could be Sisko's. You never really know what happened with Sisko's stuff after DS9. You guess what? Some of it might stay on the station. Jake would take it. I don't know. But regardless, I just was like, oh, the possibility that this Ferengi had got a hold of Sisko's baseball from DS9, I just found to be interesting. There is something that I didn't like, and that is a part where Sneed specifically mentions Section 31 by name. I don't like this. I don't like Section 31 being name dropped. I mean, this has happened with New Trek, particularly Discovery has completely destroyed what Section 31 was and its purpose when it was introduced in Deep Space Nine. It's supposed to be extremely secretive. Like, there's almost nobody knows that it even exists. Like, high-ranking Starfleet officers don't even know that it exists. Because Section 31 is not like the Tel Shiar. It's not like the Obsidian Order. It's even more secretive than that, to the point to where the vast majority of people in Starfleet have zero knowledge of its existence. So I didn't really like the fact that Section 31 was name dropped. But I did like Sneed. I think he's a pretty interesting character. Unfortunately, he's not around a whole lot. As we'll get into here in a second. So Sneed basically forces Rafi to do some drugs to prove that she's not an undercover Starfleet agent. And so Rafi says that she's working for Luca, who was the person who was accused of taking out the Starfleet recruitment center. But Sneed is like, yeah, you don't work for Luca. And he takes out Luca's severed head. And it's not the first severed head we're going to get here in this episode, because Worf shows up and completely wrecks these guys who are about to kill Rafi. And decapitates Sneed. I didn't really like this. I don't like decapitations being a regular thing in Star Trek. We saw it earlier in Picard season 1. Elnor would decapitate people. Again, 2 decapitations just in this episode, where you had Luca's severed head, and then now Sneed got completely decapitated. It was cool to see Worf, come in and take out these guys, but at the same time, it's just the overabundance of decapitations I'm not a fan of. I just don't think it's very Star Trek.
Yeah, so don't ask.
I do think it was kind of dumb that they took out Sneed in the first place, because he's a classic Ferengi. He could be a cool villain that they could stick around in the Star Trek universe. And one of the cool things about Star Trek is the recurring villains, because people didn't just get decapitated willy-nilly in Star Trek, right? You had villains that came back in other episodes, and Sneed could have been one of those, but we're not going to see him again, so I guess that's it. Then we're finally back on the Titan, and Jack busts out of the brig. And I have to say, Jack is probably the MVP of this episode, in my opinion. I think it's interesting that the new characters, Jack and Shaw, like, I like them. I like these characters. Then we find out that the bug ship is called the Shrike, as Amanda Plummer's character, Vatic, points out, and she just sits there and bloviates about what the Shrike is. And it's really interesting because I think Amanda Plummer does a really good job. It's almost too over the top. I don't know. At this point, it's kind of hard to tell, but yeah, she clearly likes to hear herself talk. Like, that's obviously a character trait for Vatic. The Riker goes down to sickbay and revives Beverly and brings her up to the bridge, and we get this long unspoken connection between Beverly and Jean-Luc, and it confirms what, I guessed, and probably most people guessed, which is that, of course, say it with me, you are the father.
You are the father.
Of course, it could just all be misdirection. I think that there is some other stuff in Jack's origin that is something else in the back of my mind says there's something else going on with Jack than just this. But regardless, Picard takes command, shuts down the transporter so Jack can't willingly give himself over, and Shaw decides, okay, well, let's go with it, and whatever happens next, that's on Picard. That's on you, Admiral. Like I said, I like Shaw. I do. Picard finally says his classic line, engage, and the Titan fires and then takes off, disappearing into the nebula. And Amanda Plummer's character, Vatic, is just laughing like the Joker. Her character, like I said, is so over the top. Only time will tell how that'll work out. But so far, I'm just like, man, this character is a little bit too over the top. Maybe dial it down a touch. I don't know. We'll see. But to recap, let's go with some of the pros first, which is, as I said, I continue to like the dialogue this season. I think the dialogue is very sharp. I think some people have some great lines. Some of these characters are given great lines, not just the characters we already pre-establishedly love from TNG, but new characters like Shaw and Jack are given intelligent dialogue. All of the dialogue speaks to the intelligence of the characters and pushes the plot forward. It's very nice. There was something that somebody else pointed out that Shaw said in the first episode where he talks about it's above my pay grade. And some people are like, well, there is no pay in Starfleet. I get that. I didn't really address it because I knew that was just used as a turn of phrase. That's how I viewed it. But regardless, I think the dialogue is very sharp. It's leaps and bounds, vast improvement over the first couple seasons of Picard. And as I said, for me, the MVP of the first episode was Jonathan Frakes' Riker. The MVP of this episode, I'd probably have to go with Jack Crusher, well introduced. Played by Ed Spillers. Hopefully I said his name right. I don't know. But Jack Crusher, I want to know more about this character. He reminds me a little bit of Eggy from Kingsman. Maybe that's just me. That's kind of what I get the feel of this character. One of the things that most modern media gets wrong is that when they're trying to introduce new characters into established franchises, they take away from the established legacy characters the audience already likes, right? And they tend to put down the legacy characters in order to elevate the new characters that they're trying to introduce, or they sideline the legacy characters just so they can elevate the new characters, or the new characters are just plain boring. Like, all of these things all result in people not liking the new characters and franchises, and sometimes all those three things can all happen all at the same time. But I do think that they really are executing well here so far with both Jack and Shaw introducing new characters. I want to see more of LaForge's daughter. I think that'll be interesting to see how she plays into it. I like Shaw, as I've said multiple times. I like how he plays off Picard and Riker. I like his dialogue. I like the chain of command being addressed. That's always nice. That's something that's been missing from New Trek. Like, the insubordination and people just acting like they aren't in a military organization has been frustrating watching New Trek as not only someone who was in the military, but someone who is a Star Trek fan. I think that these first two episodes are doing a good job of setting up the season, but I'm really hoping that we kick things into gear here in the third episode and the fourth episode. We really need to kick things into gear, which brings me to a few of the criticisms that I've had so far. One is I don't really understand what the purpose of the 2-week flashback is that opened this episode, because everything that's shown in this flashback is stuff that we find out in the episode. So that kind of makes it fairly pointless. The only question that I have, and if it is addressed, does justify the flashback, is why Beverly's not in the flashback. If that is addressed in another episode, then this flashback does serve a purpose. But if that's not addressed and that's not a point, I don't really understand why you need this this flashback. And ultimately, the weakest part of this episode is the weakest part of the last episode, which is that the pacing takes a massive hit every time it cuts back to Rafi. Not just because I don't like Rafi, but just like the pacing itself clearly obviously ties into the overall plot of what they're doing for the season, but still, pacing takes a hit. It's just not as interesting as stuff that's happening with the Titan and with Picard and Riker and everything else. And hopefully with Worf being introduced and having Worf and Rafi maybe getting some of that interplay, it'll help make it to where the pacing doesn't cut to a halt every time they do cut back to Rafi. And as I said, I'm still not a fan of Rafi. If you're lucky enough to have never seen Picard season 1 and 2, and this is the only introduction you have of Rafi, she's fine. She's fine in these first couple episodes, but unfortunately I've seen the other episodes of Picard and I don't like Rafi. I don't like her as a character. So. And a continued criticism that I'm going to continue probably to have the entire season, which is just how poorly lit the ships are. I'm just not a fan. I know that's a modern thing, but they don't make sense practically. They aren't fun to view because everything is so dark. You can barely see the color of the uniforms. Just not a fan of it, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be all season. But honestly, I can get over the whole dark lighting as long as the core of the show is good, which is strong characters, a good plot, a good story, and intelligent dialogue and stuff that actually feels like Star Trek. So far in these first couple episodes, the feeling I get out of this is that this is starting to feel more like it's in line with the movies. It's as opposed to like trying to do something from the TV show. It really does feel like more like the TNG movies, which are kind of a mixed bag. So it just feels like a better written TNG movie so far, like a really long one. So they're still in the setup phase. We'll see what they do. I am looking forward to the next episode, episode 3, which I'm sure is going to be out by the time that I get this review up. So what do you guys think about this episode of Picard? Did you guys like it? Are you giving it a chance, or are you just throwing it out the window because Picard season 1 and 2 were so terrible? I know that seems to be the case for several fans. A lot of fans out there have been burned by the previous seasons of Picard and New Trek and have given up on it. I do think so far this is lining up to be pretty good. Will it be something that I recommend yet? Maybe a couple episodes in, I'll say, yeah, you definitely should do it. At this point, it's definitely headed in a good direction. There's a lot of things I like so far. I'm looking forward to the next episode. But regardless, whatever you think, comment below and let me know. And thank you to everyone who checked out this video. Thank you, subscribers. All of you are awesome. And if you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, or don't. I'm not a beggar. I'm Geechu64, and I'll always tell you the truth.